It was just an ordinary farewell. Until I zoomed in on the image after the departure and felt my conscience and the spirit. Alexander always believed that photography was a safe way to live, capturing the emotions of others without having to feel his own. Weddings, graduations, farewells. He recorded everything with technical precision, keeping his heart locked behind the lens. But on that December afternoon, when a heart attack struck him down in the middle of a photo shoot, something impossible happened. He died holding the camera, and on the other side, he discovered that it still worked. Only now, instead of smiling faces, the camera revealed hidden guilt, wasted loves, invisible wounds of the soul. And the first image that appeared on the viewfinder was the most painful of all, his absence in his own daughter's life. What Alexander didn't know was that death was not the end, but the beginning of the true life/life. Conscience. That moment of brutal lucidity where all the masks fall and the spirit, he is left naked before his own truth. 5 dimension between life and death, where the spiritual warfare it happens within each soul. He would need to pierce through every wound his camera revealed. Because there was no escape, no lens to hide behind, only the raw, transformative truth. And when his daughter Clara suffered an accident and was left suspended in a near-death experience, Alexander was given one last chance. Not to change the past, but to finally be the father he never was. If this story touched your heart, please like, share with those who need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel, because every soul deserves a second chance to start over. Alexander always believed that the camera was an extension of the gaze, a way to capture the world without actually touching it. For 40 years, he photographed weddings, baptisms, graduations, always from the outside of the emotion, always protected by the lens. When the heart attack struck him down in the middle of a photo shoot, on a hot December afternoon, he didn't even have time to feel fear. He only had time to press the shutter one last time, capturing the orange sky that opened up above him, as if inviting him to something greater. But on the other side, where the light was different and time didn't flow the same way, Alexander discovered he still had the camera in his hands. Only now, every time he pointed it at someone, he didn't see smiling faces or rehearsed poses. He saw unconfessed guilt, wasted loves, words swallowed by pride. It was as if the camera had stopped photographing what the eyes see and started revealing what the soul hides. And on the digital viewfinder, the first image that appeared was of himself. A man surrounded by people, but completely alone. Alexander realized too late that he had spent his entire life observing, but never truly seeing. Throughout his earthly existence, Alexander had built an invisible fortress around his chest. The camera was the perfect shield, allowing him to be present at all the important moments in other people's lives without ever having to give his own heart away. Weddings where he cried inside, but kept his finger firmly on the trigger. Farewells that he recorded with technical precision, while stifling any memory of his own losses. Now, without a physical body to serve as armor, every emotion he had avoided his entire life returned like a giant wave, crashing over him. Conscience exposed. The spiritual guide accompanying him, a serene-looking woman named Helena, patiently explained that there, in that dimension beyond matter, there was no escaping what one feels. You've spent decades observing the pain of others through a glass lens, Alexander. Here, you will need to traverse your own pain, without any filter between you and the truth. And it was precisely at that moment that he understood. Death was not a punishment, but a near-death experience, the permanent end of his false identity. He had died to the man who pretended not to feel. Now, he needed to learn to live as spirit, vulnerable, exposed, completely alive for the first time. Alexander held the camera with trembling hands, still trying to understand the new rules of that place where time seemed elastic and the light came from within things. Helena guided him to an immense hall, full of people he recognized, old clients, acquaintances from the city, faces he had captured in happy poses. But when he pointed the lens at them, what appeared on the viewfinder were not frozen smiles or staged embraces. They were ghostly images. A mother carrying the absence of the son she never visited, a man holding withered flowers for a love he betrayed, a small child staring into the void where his father should be. This camera now reveals the invisible, Alexander, Helena explained. her voice sounding like flowing water. It shows the weight each soul carries, the wounds no one sees, the pieces of themselves that people have left behind. He turned the camera to his own hands and, for the first time, saw the marks his silences had left on others, especially on Clara, his daughter. The image showed a 7-year-old girl waiting at the window, a teenager crying alone in her room, an adult woman who had learned not to expect anything from him anymore. Alexander felt something break inside his chest, or was it outside? In that dimension, the difference between inside and outside no longer existed. Everything was conscience-pure, exposed like an open wound to the wind. Alexander expected to find gates, scales weighing sins, some kind of cosmic tribunal where his failings would be listed one by one. But there was none of that. There were no external judges, only himself. Conscience reflected back to him, amplified, impossible to ignore. Helena explained that on that plane, which some called 5th dimension, there is no punishment from the outside, only the natural consequence of finally seeing with total clarity. You are not being judged, Alexander. You are awakening. And awakening hurts, because it is seeing for the first time the real impact of each choice you have made. He began to understand that the spiritual warfare, the real battle, was never against external demons or evil forces from outside. It was an internal battle between truth and illusion, between what he pretended to be and what he really was. Each photograph, the camera, revealed was an invitation to pierce through a layer of denial, to confront the spirit that he had stifled under decades of emotional detachment. And the more he looked, the more he realized that this process wasn't about guilt. It was about healing. It was about finally having the courage to feel everything he had spent his entire life avoiding. But there was one image he still didn't have the courage to fully reveal. The last photograph he took before he died, the one of the orange sky. Something in it pulsed with an intensity he wasn't yet ready to face. Alexander asked to see Clara. Not the distorted image the camera revealed, but his real daughter, alive, breathing in the world of the living. Helena hesitated, but eventually agreed. You're going to see her as she is now, Alexander. And perhaps that will be more difficult than any photograph. When the scene unfolded before him, Clara was sitting at a small kitchen table, holding a cup of cold coffee, looking at the cell phone where her father's obituary photo gleamed. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She just stared with that empty expression he knew so well, because it was the same one he wore when photographing funerals. He tried to touch her shoulder, but his hand passed through like mist. She learned from me? Alexander whispered, sensing the conscience burn like fire. I taught my daughter not to feel, not to expect, to observe life from afar as if she were just a spectator. Helena placed her hand on his shoulder, and this time he felt it. A father's silence echoes through generations. Alexander, you weren't just absent. You taught a child that love was something to photograph in others, never to live. And it was there, watching Clara close her phone and return to her routine as if nothing had changed, that Alexander understood the true weight of his omission. He hadn't just lost the chance to be a father. He had stolen from her the chance to be a daughter. But Helena said something that lit a spark in the void. There's still time. In another way, Helena had a way of speaking that shattered all of Alexander's certainties. She didn't use fancy words or prepared speeches about the afterlife. She spoke with the simplicity of someone who had already crossed her own hell and returned with her hands full of seeds. Do you know the difference between looking and seeing, Alexander? She asked as they walked down a seemingly endless corridor of golden light. Looking is receiving information. Seeing is allowing that information to transform you. You've spent 40 years looking through a lens, but you've never allowed anything to truly touch you. She recounted that she had also been a photographer in life, and that she died in an accident trying to capture the perfect image of a storm. I pursued beauty in the external world because I was afraid of the ugliness I carried within, until death threw me face to face with my own conscience, and I realized that the spiritual warfare, the hardest part is this, the struggle to stop running away from yourself. Alexander listened to each word as if it were the first time someone had truly spoken to him, not just been near him. Helena smiled and pointed to the camera he was still holding. This tool is now in your hands for a different purpose. Not to capture, but to heal. Each photograph it reveals is a wound begging for attention. And there's one in particular that you haven't wanted to see yet. Alexander knew exactly which one it was, that last image of the orange sky. The one that held the most painful secret of all. Alexander finally mustered the courage to open the file of that last photo, the one of the orange sky he captured while falling. But when the image expanded on the viewfinder, it wasn't just the sky that appeared. It was Clara at 3 years old, stretching her little arms out to him as he adjusted the tripod to photograph the sunset. It was Clara at 12, trying to show him the drawing she made at school while he edited photos on the computer. It was Clara at 21, calling to invite him to her graduation, and him hanging up because he had a wedding to photograph. Every lost moment was there, superimposed, pulsing like a broken heart in slow motion. "Do you see now?" Helena whispered. "Every click you've taken in life was a choice to look away from it. The camera recorded everything. Not on memory cards, but in your own soul." Alexander fell to his knees, or perhaps to his knees. Spirit, it didn't matter anymore. The pain was real, burning like a purifying fire, and he finally understood that these wounds weren't there to punish him, but to show him the way back. Each photograph was an invitation to rewrite history, not changing the past, but transforming what could still be done. Helena reached out her hand. "There's one last mission for you, Alexander. One last chance to be the father you never were." And for the first time since she died, he felt something beyond pain and regret. He felt hope. But what she was about to ask of him would require a kind of courage he never possessed in life. Helena explained that Clara was going through a critical moment, a near-death experience after a car accident. She was suspended between two worlds, and the conscience she wandered in a gray limbo where the most important decisions of existence are made, to return or to move forward. "You can appear to her now, Alexander, not as the absent father you were, but as the spirit who finally learned to see. You have a window of time, brief, fragile, to say what you never said, to be the presence that was always missing." Alexander felt his chest tighten with a mixture of terror and gratitude. It wasn't paradise they were giving him as a gift. It was responsibility. When he stepped through the veil and reached Clara, he found his daughter sitting on an empty beach, gazing at the horizon as if waiting for something that would never arrive. She didn't recognize him immediately. After all, he had always been more absent than present. But when Alexander knelt on the sand beside her and said, his voice choked with emotion, "I'm sorry, my daughter, for spending my whole life looking at you through a lens instead of truly embracing you." Clara turned her face and finally saw him, not the distant father, but the spirit awake, a conscience in flames, the man who needed to die to finally learn how to live. And there, in that 5th dimension where time and space bow before true love, healing has begun. Because sometimes, death is not the end of the story. It's just the moment when we finally have the courage to live the truth we've always avoided. Alexander learned the hard way that life can't be photographed. It's lived, felt, surrendered with an open and vulnerable heart. How many times have you also observed life from afar, protected by some invisible lens, avoiding feeling so as not to suffer? How many people have you loved in silence, never saying the words that could have changed everything? The truth is that we all carry an invisible camera inside us. Conscience, recording every lost moment, every hug not given, every "I love you" swallowed by fear. And one day, when we cross the veil between worlds, this camera will reveal not what we did, but who we truly were when no one was watching. But the good news is that you're still alive, you still have time, you can still put down the camera and give a real hug. And what is the photograph of your soul that you are afraid to reveal? What wound still needs healing? What person is still waiting to hear from you the words that can transform everything? Leave your answer in the comments, because when we share our truths, we build bridges between souls and remind each other that we are never alone on this journey. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this story with anyone who needs to remember that true love is never photographed from afar. It embraces, cries, bleeds, and is reborn every day. Because in the end, the only thing we take with us is 5th dimension. It's not the images we capture, but the love we had the courage to live.